All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome to the Gamertarians. Tonight we got Rez in the house, and we got the great Shagsworth joining us from Shagsland. Welcome, Shag.
How's it going, everybody?
It's going good. Um, I'm excited because tonight we're going to be talking about the great V for Vendetta, and it had been
Mm.
a long time since I had seen this film. And it's funny because in my memory, it's like one of the best movies I've seen recently. But then I was like, holy crap, this was 2005, you know?
Right. It used to be a good movie. It still is, but it used to too.
Right. So I think Rez is going to kind of help, walk us through this movie together and talk about the stuff we remember most about it and stuff we forgot. So tell us about it, Rez.
So, I'm not going to recap. I mean, if you haven't seen the movie, then I don't want to. I mean, honestly, go away. Don't watch our review. Go see it because it's too good. Because we're going to spoil it and talk about it. First, but the first thing we want to do is talk about it in terms of the liberty and freedom perspective, and how it sort of advances, or movie advances or does not advance the ideas of freedom or liberty. Uh, So, with that in mind, I will first ask Shag, what do you feel about it in terms of how has this movie advanced liberty or freedom?
Well, I think the, the beautiful part about this movie is how on the nose it is, and there's they don't really pull any punches, and I wondered if the movie would have been made the same had it been made in 2020 or 2021.
Yeah.
Likely not. And even seeing some of the people who are in the movie is kind of funny, but I think
Yeah.
I think this does a number, especially when you watch it today. It does a real number on your idea of like what liberty is. And I just went down this really deep dark rabbit hole of cultural hegemony the other day, and it was like, and I'm watching this movie and like kind of watching the clips on hegemony a lot, and I'm like, what's happening? Like this is all the stuff they're talking about is like taking place in this movie. And I think if you watch it from a very open-minded perspective in a liberty like frame of mind, you can't help but think like I do not want this for my world.
Mm.
Like as much as it is a comic, or it was a comic, and I think it was, it's made as like a warning to people, like be careful what you're willing to give up, because you will likely not get it back for a long time, and it will take an extremely radical movement in order to acquire those again.
Yeah.
And so I think if it's approached that way, I mean that's what it does for like libertarianism. And I'm relatively new to the concept. Well, not new to like the term, like I've known about it for a long time, but more my political awakening has kind of exposed me to much different political leanings and ideologies, and this really sort of solidified to me like what it means to like hold on to your liberty and not be so quick to give it up, even under the guise of like security and um, national security or public health or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's my take, real fast.
Correct?
Well, I remember. So I was surprised. I just had forgotten a lot about this film, and when the credits rolled, I was like, "Oh my gosh! Of course I love this film because I love The Matrix and the Wachowski units made it." So it's like so awesome. And by the way, why does old Page get all their credits redone, but the Wachowski units don't get their credits redone? That doesn't make sense to me. Like they need to re-release the movie and send me a politically correct copy. Because every time I watch the credits roll now, I am just like, why are you dead
I'm
naming them?
absolutely triggered. Yeah.
I'm just like,
Uh,
I'm just triggered.
to be fair,
Um,
it's my DVD rip from like 2006.
okay,
So,
all right, there you go. Well then, yeah, I guess you now don't owe them money if they were to
mhm.
sue you. Um, but yeah, it was like really good to watch it again. I hadn't watched it. I didn't know in how long, and I remember liking it at the time. But as you were alluding to, like it's a different film to watch in 2021. It's a completely different film, And you gotta wish that there were more films bold enough to speak that kind of truth when it's not easy. Like, think about about the time that was made, and like some of the themes that they put out there that just they don't land as like super edgy anymore. Like there's a lot of like referring to someone's sexual preferences and how like that's such deviancy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like
Yep.
not today, man. Like that stuff's freaking celebrated, right? So like even back in all the way back in 2005, like that was edgy, and like references to like Muslims, the way he says it,
Muslims,
yeah,
homosexuals,
yeah, right, right,
degenerates.
degenerates, yeah, like when he's talking about it, and to me, it's just like that's not the battle of our time now. Like the progressives, they win one and they move on. They're on to the next one, right? It's just like they never pause for a moment to do a victory lap. It's just like, what's the next fight? And I they couched it in terms of like faith, like the faith was going to get it through to them, and like fighting against
Mm-hmm.
godlessness. And like where that resonated with me is how I look at kind of the what do they call it, the branch Covidians, like they how it has become like the all of the ritual that we do to signal our where we stand virtuously in the whole COVID regime, like to make sure that like almost like at a Pharisee level, like that that I know the rituals, I know the right things to say, I know the way to communicate to you that we're in this together and that we're going to build back better, and that I'm willing to sacrifice for you. Why can't you be willing to sacrifice for me? Just the surge of collectivism that's kind of come as a result of I think fear, honestly. And
Yeah.
that's what V alludes to, is like I just love the he's got airtime, right? He breaks into the broadcast central, and notice how like the power of centralization gets used against the regime in this, where it's like I like just the real quick, it's like, you designed it this way, sir, you told me that, like all stations, every channel, so like that power of decentralization gets used against them. And there's
Mm-hmm.
so much spin. Oh my gosh, how the media just goes to work, for the regime, and that really, like, with the news last week, there was like, uh, you know, we didn't fund gain of function. We didn't fund gain of function. Oh, we didn't fund gain of function of concern. Like they just the little nuances and little changes they make. So I wrote it down. It said, while the truncheon may be used in lieu of conversation, words will always retain their power. Words offer the the means of meaning, and those that will listen, the enunciation of truth.
Right.
And where once you had freedom to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and surveillance, coercing your conformity and soliciting submission. Then the next part is perfect. If you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror. I know why you did it. I know why you were afraid. Who wouldn't be? War, terror, disease. There were a myriad of things that robbed you of your reason and your common sense. Fear got the best of you, and you turned to the now High Chancellor Adam Sutler. He promised you order, he promised you peace, and all he demanded in return was your silent, obedient consent. I mean, that right there may be some of my favorite moments in cinema, the way he just lays it out there. And I think that message is so true of today. It's like, I know why people, it's true today. People were fearful. There's so much fear, and they want order, they want certainty back, and they're willing to sacrifice their liberties to get the illusion of it.
Well, that's the. I think that I mean I wrote that exact quote down.
Yeah.
I was actually writing it word for word, and then I was like, wait a minute, the internet exists. I can just go copy and paste.
I should have done that.
But it,
I'm
This
like,
isn't 2005.
yeah, right. But I think that was really, and what's really interesting about this movie, and as I watched it, not only it is a very beautifully shot movie.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the irony is the Wachowski sisters wrote this movie way back then, and I feel like I don't know if it's a regret they have doing it now, but like just the way it all kind of comes not a regret, but I wonder if they realized what they were doing
Yeah.
at the time, because the movie it's one of the best written movies that I've ever seen, and that line right there takes place so early on, but it doesn't fall off at that point. Like that sets the precedent for the entire thing. But again, like I'm getting goosebumps.
Yeah.
You watch it now, right now in 2021, almost 2022, you think, what have we done? And why is this why does it sound like we're just recapping what's really happening out there? Because again, the way the media goes to work for the establishment class in that or the the not the establishment class, but like the
The ruling
the
class.
government,
Yeah.
the ruling class.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's insane. It's insane the parallels between then a fictional world and what's going on today, because the same thing happens, the same media spin. Like again, the dialogue in that is just too close to home, and it's a little disturbing.
Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Beautiful movie.
Yeah, I wrote down the line from the scene right where they're telling about what happened to the Old Bailey, which was just that, why shouldn't they believe us? It's not our job to fabricate the news. That's the government's job.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God,
Man.
it's literally
Right.
But I'm also sad when I see the movie, because you can actually see Bush signs at times to remind you when it was. I was like, oh, I remember when the left was anti-war.
Yeah.
That's why they
Right.
made this movie.
Yeah.
Because at that time, the popular thing on the left was to hate George Bush and the wars. So it
Yeah.
was cool to be anti-war. And
Yeah.
now it isn't. But fortunately, they did make that, so we have it. But what's interesting for me seeing it now in this perspective, everything you guys have said for sure, but I don't know if either of you guys have seen too much about post-libertarianism at all recently.
I've seen it, but I don't know what they're talking about.
The best thing I can get from it is it's sort of what like a lot of black-pilled libertarians have become, where it's like, all right, well, we tried the peaceful way, now it's going to have to be libertarianism through violence or something like that. And I get a little bit of that from this movie at this point, where it's like, if you become really hopeless, you start to think, well, the only way is V for Vendetta. The only way is if we start killing people.
Right.
We have to start murdering politicians and things like that. And I don't think that's the case. I mean, the Soviet Union exists, and one day it did exist, and then one day it didn't, and there was no great, massive, bloody battle that ended it. It just ended because of economics. So I think part of the problems with what I'm understanding this post-libertarianism to be this is just sort of people are too lost in the weeds and the difficulty of the times we're in, because it's hard to see outside of this period, which will probably be a decade or 2 decades worth of time, really. And then once we're out, once it's history, once it's 10 or 20 years, it'll be like, oh, of course we should have known we were going to get out of it, or it was going to go this way, or because of the way we're fighting for it, it was going to be okay. But when you're in the middle of it, it's like Jeff Deist just said, like, no one in the middle of a revolution is like, hey, it's a revolution right now. It's only a decade after where you realize how the world's changed. Like, oh, that was the revolution. That was when it happened. So that was how I saw this movie differently this time, which I found interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think before this movie was just like oh wow, this is a really cool like kind of action flick, and man,
Yeah,
that would suck
yeah.
if that ever happened.
Right.
And I know I think in 2005 I was 2 years out of high school, and I was pretty like ignorant of politics at the time, because I mean your whole life you're just like, we don't talk about politics. It's a old man's game. Don't bother yourself with it.
I miss those days.
Right.
Me too.
Ignorance is bliss. It's just like, but now it's like, I find myself so ingrained in culture and politics and, in these socioeconomic these happenings rather. And when I watch this movie now, I just think, what? Like you wonder, like, how was I asleep for so long? Like this, because all this stuff is a slow burn. They explain the whole thing to you in the movie. They explain the tactics that are almost happening now. You create events that, you establish some fear in people, and then slowly they give up, one thing for the next, and before they know it, and to watch the the public's awakening in that movie too is another like beautiful thing, because they're all, everyone's just sitting there like watching the news or in their homes just like blah, and get the chancellor up on the wall. And then as like V starts to sort of like pop in, you see their eyes light up like, oh my god, I know exactly what he's talking about, this is how I feel. But they can't outwardly express it because they're afraid at any turn someone's going to turn them in. We've already seen people recently talking about turning in family members because there are too many people at their house, no face masks on, all this stuff. It's like I said, it's just a very haunting thing. Like I said, my skin crawls, not because the movie is amazing, but also because it's so true. And people that we've known, have, or at least I've known, have fallen victim to all this stuff.
I also noted this time around, even though like the old people like the boomers come around eventually in the end. In the beginning, they're like the most status. They have the flags on the wall along with like the picture of him and everything, and like. So I thought it was funny. I was like, yeah, it's usually the older people are the ones who are even more into it because they've got the most benefit from it. When it's the younger generations who are suffering more. Fortunately, in that movie, they all come along. I'm not so sure about real life for that one.
Right. I think you're seeing people. I think you're seeing like this movement start, and I think that's what kind of it gives me hope in just life in general. Is that I used to think that Twitter was never a measure of anything when it came to like social discourse, but I have to say, since 46 was elected, I mean, you see him ratioed to shit almost every time a clip of him goes up on YouTube, something on Twitter, whatever. It seems to be a kind of a clear indication of where people are, and I don't know. As I watch people in the movie sort of wake up and start to have like little smirks on their face, they're laughing at the comedy show that Stephen Fry puts on. Like, these are the things that will like eventually break people, and it's, the term now is red pilling, and it's slowly, you're slowly starting to see that. It's not as quick as the movie. It won't be over a year, like you said. It'll probably be a decade long battle from 2020, but I think you're starting to see that, and it does give me hope that. You might not see a giant mass whole city of people going to stand up, but I think you're gonna start seeing a real turn, and not to get too political on stuff, but
Please get as political as possible. uh, I wrote down, I mentioned this, or you mentioned the part about the television show, and that's I thought about it this time. I realized like that actually could have been a turning point for the government. Yeah. Because Jordan Peterson has noted, if you're familiar with JBP, which I'm sure you are, like the time when things are bad when the government executes the jester. Mm-hmm. The jester is the only person who can speak the truth. So if he gets away with that, if they just let him do that, that might have actually softened the populace a little bit, because they were all having fun, they were having a good time. They were, like for the first time in all, they've been angry this all the time. Now they're laughing and having fun. But no, he kills the jester, and that's got to be the last straw. Like that shows that they got to do something.
Mm-hmm. Do you think? Do you guys know? I could have just Googled it, but I didn't think of it until now. But like, do they actually celebrate the 5th of November? Is it like celebrated in the UK?
I don't know the answer to that.
Because I just wonder, it'd be so interesting if there's actually like some, I don't even know how Guy Fawkes is viewed in the culture, was ever or is now viewed. Like, do they actually celebrate a guy who went to go blow up Parliament? I mean, it's so interesting. Like, there's when you think about like the hacking group Anonymous has like adopted the Guy Fawkes mask. And they like to take action across the spectrum. I don't know that much about them, to be honest with you. But I think they just like a kind of a take no prisoners attitude, and they don't really choose sides. I don't know a lot about it. Kind of talking out of my ass here, but like I think it's interesting that like they are called Anonymous. And the crescendo of the film there with the blowing up of Parliament and everyone showing up in that large gathering area with them looking just like V. It's like V gave them the ability, they gave them the reason to gather together to stand for something. He gave them the encouragement, he gave them the time, he gave them the place, and also he physically equipped them with some form of anonymity to do so together. And then the big ending is the fireworks are going off, the building's blowing up, and then they all unmask, right?
Right.
So the way I see that is like they had to come together collectively without risking their identities per se until like that which was threatening individualism and liberty was destroyed, and then they were able to unmask. And I think it's cool how they they plant some of the characters in the audience that are dead, but they're there
Right.
together, and it's kind of sappy. Natalie Portman's like closing lines there, like who was he? He was my mother, my father, my brother. But to me, I love it. It's beautiful. What would be interesting to me, and it may ruin the whole film, is like, but what happens the next day? Like what happens the day after? The smoldering parliament. Now what? You know.
You just broke it. You just movie's ruined. No, it's a good question, but I think the question is answered in the final moments when when people do unmask like that. So like you said, that people come together as a collective, anonymous, like we are all each other. Like they're that's the interesting paradox of I think the world is like we are individuals and it's really important to have that individuality and to take care of yourself, but you can't ignore the fact that humans in general thrive in communities, small,
Absolutely.
albeit small communities, but it's important to never let go of that. And sometimes we do have to come together in a common good, but at the end of that, we need to return to who we are. We can finally pull the mask back, and yes, we are individual, and that's important to hold on to that. So from that day on, these people are they're no longer part of the collective, whether it's this blue pilled society, or if it's a individual red pilled society where everyone's like, no, this is, I'm not giving this up anymore. Like I want to be able to speak my mind if I don't like something. I want to be able to you know be able to have political discourse and dissent, that's healthy for a healthy society. And again, it's he says it right in the beginning. He says all this stuff right in the beginning of the movie, and how everything unfolds is just beautiful. So I think the day after is just like blue skies, like it's everything. It's like, I hate to say happily ever after, but maybe that is just it.
Well, I will say, Finch would technically be like a head of state because you've got,
Right.
like it's actually they don't mention it in the movie, but I learned about this from reading about the book. So you've got like I think it's the head is basically they're named after like body parts. So you've got the head, which is Sutler, and then you have the hand, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the ears. So Creedy is the hand,
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
and that's why they're called fingermen.
Okay.
And then the nose is Finch, person sniffing out crime, and then you've got the eyes, which is obviously it's a surveillance team.
The surveillance state.
There's two surveillance because you got the eyes and the ears; those are both forms of surveillance, and then the mouth is Dascombe, and then out of the mouth comes the voice of London, which was Prothero. So they all have this sort of connection like that. So technically, they're all at the top. So you've got Finch, who technically is like the only surviving head of state, who also let it all happen. So you got a chance that if he's still feeling good in the morning, that he doesn't suddenly power trip and like it's mine now, then you think you've got a chance for like, all right, now go live or whatever. So there's some hope there, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the ending was one of my favorites of. I mean, there were some parts of the like last maybe 20 minutes, starting with the like subway fight, which I thought were kind of corny, but I'm sure the translation from like graphic novel to here is difficult. All the like little ghost trails on the thing were kind of meh, but
They were cool in
watching
2005, right after the
right
Matrix.
they were right they were, but like watching Finch's transformation again, he along with maybe 20 minutes of society, like he's more hesitant, right? Because he's got more irons in the fire. He's a little bit more in it. but he understands, and like these are where like these are the important moments where people have to step up, and you're seeing a lot of this happen now. A lot of big YouTubers out there who or people who aren't even necessarily in politics but in culture. And someone like I really like to follow James Lindsay. He's another like voice. I mean, he's a mathematician, but he spent the past couple years doing work on critical race theory and opposing that in schools and exposing frauds in academia. I mean, these are the people like Finch who, even though Finch wasn't too like outright, like a lot of people now are just outright because we do have freedom of speech. They don't have that in this world, but those are the people you need. Those transformations are important to the movement because if he had not let Evie pull the lever, he would have shot her dead right there and stopped it and been the hero. But he understands what needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I now I forget the line, but I forget what the line is right before he like.
This country needs more than a building; it needs hope.
Exactly.
Boom.
I've seen the movie a few times.
Right. Yes.
Just stuff like there. It's so I can't believe 2005. They talk about what is it, our sphincter America or something like that. Like
Yeah. The ulcered sphincter of Ars Erica.
Ars Erica, yeah. They talk about how the plague they created, dude. It's just like it's nuts, and how they were justifying human experimentation, right? They were justifying the losses. It's as soon as human life becomes devalued, bar the door. Like it just there's no end to what you can justify.
And they're literally testing needles in people.
I know. I know. And I think it's so crazy. Like, what did you guys make of? So I think the film actually has excellent pacing, even though there is that long sequence where Evie's got her a head shaved and she's going through the toilet paper messages and stuff. Like that is definitely slower, but it's so important, I think, for the character development and the storytelling. What do you guys make of the I got to get out and get in the rain and other than repeating the line God is in the rain, do you think there is any significance to that that line maybe specifically?
That God is in the rain.
Yeah. Other than it came from that story of those two female lovers who were separated.
I mean, I'm gonna go second on this one.
Okay.
Rez, why don't you go first?
Perfect. Shag, you take it away. I have always wondered about that line. I have searched for like the true meaning of that line or like tried to, and I have not been able to get it to figure out exactly what it is, other than just I think it's meant to be like a baptismal scene. And so that might be why you invoke God, and she goes out in the rain, she puts her arms up, and she's being cleansed and becoming a different person. And it also changes with the way that he's been baptized by fire. And so it shows the different, they're different paths, basically, because he was forged in fire, he's going to burn. Whereas, she's reborn in the water, in the rain.
Awesome.
And so she's the one who's going to go forward. I just came up with that right now. I'm amazing.
Dude, you're intelligent.
I think that was about what I was looking. I kind of wanted to see where you're going with that, Rez. So rain in film is always used as some sort of like baptismal or symbol or rebirth, and I think this is again it's to show the corollary between her story and his story and how again he was forged in fire. She is sort of like washing away her old self, that fear that she had, and is reborn into this world that like it this is what it takes. It takes to sort of separate all this emotion, and it's a beautiful scene. It's a little corny. Natalie Portman's a great actress, but it definitely did not hit with the same weight like of him walking out of the flames and like rah!
Yeah.
Like that was powerful.
Yeah.
But it's still a beautiful scene and a necessary scene because it marks like truly her her transformation and her baptism into her new life. Um, yeah.
Going back to the idea of like the day after Parliament blows up, I think um, like this is why we're big fans of voluntary communities, and we're definitely more on the ANCAP side of the spectrum, where no rulers. We believe that governance is important, but you don't have to have a government to do that, and you know we're all about community. Like humans won't really flourish, as you were alluding to, if there's a total lack of community.
Mhm.
No man is an island, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that they would struggle at first, and there may just be another strong man who steps up to helps quash the fear. And it's nice to think that like 100% of London was on board with that, but that probably wasn't 100% of London that was there that day. But I think it's one of those things where like you're never in any system you're never going to have 100% security, 100% assurance that you'll be provided for and protected. I mean, that does fall to the individual. To be, we talk about, being your own first responder. Like there's an element of responsibility that comes with that. That's one thing that makes Bitcoin so powerful is because the transactions are immutable and irreversible. That also means that you can accidentally lose it all, yeah, out of user error or negligence. But but if it isn't that way, then Bitcoin isn't the phenomenon it is, right? Because it doesn't require that trust that the centralized sources do. So they also talk about Count of Monte Cristo a lot, a lot. Why do you think that's such a focus?
I haven't seen it, so I don't know, but I assume there's some sort of allegory there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not. I'll admit, I am not someone who's well versed in that story. Other than, I mean, yeah, I don't really want to speculate because I have an idea of what that story is about,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to be wrong and make a fool of myself.
Okay.
The only thing I can take from it is she notes the line. Her line after they watch it is she feels bad for Mercedes because he cared more about revenge than about her.
Yeah.
And the end of the movie is basically we see where he's willing to put her through torture to make her basically into a better person, but he knows he's going to lose her if he does it. Because he could just capture her and say, like, all right, you can't leave now, you're mine.
Mm-hmm.
And Stockholm syndrome her, and, then now he gets to be with the person he loves or whatever for a little bit. But he does what's better for her, really. But it means that he loses her in the process. Or I don't think he realizes it at the time. It's not until he loses her or she leaves that he realizes what he's lost.
Mm-hmm.
This in the same way that she refers to it in the movie.
Yeah. I think it's a reminder to V, to himself, that the title is V for Vendetta. There's a vendetta. Like this is a matter of getting back and getting even, at least at some level, but not to be consumed by that revenge. And also realizing that when the cycle of justice or revenge, call it what you will, when that is complete, he also realizes that his life is complete. Like he goes to meet his maker there. He knew that was a one-way ticket, that encounter there at the end.
Also, the dominoes thing is like so
Yeah.
perfect.
Oh man.
It's like setting up all those dominoes and realizing the whole movie is setting up the dominoes and his 10 or 15 years of work, whatever it was, that he put into this whole thing. And then the very last piece, him, is it's like I will not, this is the last one, and essentially have to sacrifice myself in this.
Yeah.
And it was just so beautiful because I don't think I put that together like because I probably watched this movie 2 or 3 times 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if I really picked up on that or if I was just distracted at that particular moment every time. But when I saw it this time, I was like, whoa, okay, that's pretty powerful. And like I said, the movie's so beautifully shot
Mm-hmm.
that I don't know if there's like really any scenes where I was just like, what were they thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Like everything just looked looked amazing. It's a shame that the Wachowskis like had The Matrix in this, and they had the other movies, but like they just not like those two movies just hit, man.
Man, it's
They
so
were onto
hard.
something with
Yeah.
these like dystopian like future like movies, you know.
Well, they
It,
also
it,
made the
uh,
Matrix sequels, which are
no,
not
and
nearly
I
as good.
purposely left those out. I said The Matrix. I didn't mention the
There
other
were
one.
movies that happened in between the Matrix and
And one more to come. Ugh.
yeah. Oof.
Yeah, dude. I don't know.
Um,
I don't
well,
know if I can see it.
I was gonna say it's I love the domino scene, but it's hilarious to think about in like real time in the movie. He was like, "All right, got the mask set out, and well, nothing to do but the waiting." So
Right.
pull out my
That's
dominoes.
hilarious. Yeah.
Yep.
I'd like to look up like trivia, movie trivia, like how many people, the contractors, how many hours, what they pay for that Domino's
Right.
scene, you know?
I think it was
How
like
many times did
10,000 over like half a day, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, to set it all up.
And how
With
many
one
times
shot.
did it like fall over and they had to like reshoot it?
Yeah. So
There is a funny thing you can notice about that scene next time you see it is that when they capture the dominoes actually ending on the one, there's actually one just behind it that is still standing up, and then they cut away for a second and they come back and they've clearly like matted that down so you can't see it because they obviously only had one shot
yeah.
to get that
Right.
everything going down, but you can actually see in the background there's like one standing up, and so clearly someone was like, okay, all right, action.
Here's another scene that I thought, and this was so dumb. I don't know why I was thinking it at the time, but when Natalie Portman's getting her head shaved, I just thought like I was thinking like, wow, there's so much emotion in that scene.
Yeah.
She's like, it's really really some great acting. I was like, what if she didn't do that good? Like
Yeah.
they cut off all her hair and then what? I guess they could like put like a wig on and shave that.
Maybe.
But
Yeah.
I just thought, like, I don't know. I just thought that little moment was like, you got to be on your game because if you that you have one shot, otherwise it's gone.
I had that
Right.
that thought too, Shag, that like, you know, you really have to be ready. Like this is your scene. Like we can't, it's going to be hard to do this again, so you got to get it right.
Although there's some good motivation, like we're gonna cut off all your beautiful hair. Here we go.
Yeah.
There's already a little bit right there. That's
Right.
Yeah. So can we just like zoom in on Natalie for a second? Like,
sure.
I am a huge Natalie Portman fan, and I think she's one of the most attractive people I'm aware of. I'm really drawn to her. Maybe it's because she's like petite and I'm just like not. I don't know, just like opposites kind of things. But like, I really
The ogre and the princess.
yes, exactly. And I had the benefit of like not watching all of her appearances in the Star Wars films like as they came out. Like I either just missed them or didn't care to see them or whatever. So like I didn't have like the Amidala baggage or whatever that comes with like looking at Natalie today. And like I had just, and this is like all like kind of like young adult teen angsty stuff, but I had just seen in '04 Garden State came out, and I love everything that Focus Features puts out. And I was never a big Zach Braff fan, but like I love that film. I loved it at the time. It spoke to me where I was in my life, you know, single, trying to figure out relationships and stuff. Great soundtrack too. And she was in that, and I was like already in love with Natalie from that film. And then the next year this comes out, and then a few years later Black Swan comes out, and I'm just like, man, I think she's an excellent actress and very very nice to look at too. So
If you really want to pour cold water on that, you can watch Leanne the Professional,
okay, I
where
won't.
she's like 11 or 12 years old.
I was just gonna say, have you seen The Professional?
No, my first exposure
And
to
it's
her.
implied that she has a relationship with an older man.
Oh,
In that, so
you hate to see it.
actually,
Okay.
the movie's amazing. But
Oh, is it good? Okay.
oh yeah, it's a
really
really really
good.
good movie.
Okay. All right. I should check it out. I should see everything she's been in. I really like her. Leon the Professional. Anybody else want to sing Natalie's praises, or we can move on?
I am not attracted to her.
Oh
Go on,
wow!
Shag.
All right. All right.
She's beautiful. I was gonna say Black Swan was one of my favorite things she's been in. Like, what a like terrifying movie in many ways.
Yeah.
But like the, there was a movie recently that, I was thinking Thor, but yeah, this is probably my least favorite movie that she's been in.
Mhm.
And now she's apparently gonna take over the mantle of of Thor, or or is gonna have some sort of involvement with Love and Thunder, the next installment, which I think is like 2022. Like, I think it's late 2022 that one's coming out. But yeah, she was great in this movie. And like I said, there was that one scene outside in the rain, which was a beautiful scene, but it just didn't have the same like impact as his cleansing. But other than that, it was, yeah, she's smoking in that movie.
Yeah.
I'm attracted to a particular type of woman, or particularly Bill's type of woman, and she does not do it for me.
I see.
Uh,
Fair.
she's kind of like 2 aspirin on an ironing board, and that doesn't do it for me.
Like when
Which
she's in
South
the
Park even made fun of, I
newsroom,
think.
you know that like kind of like professional outfit she has on, like in the newsroom. I'm just like,
I'm not there for it.
real nice. That's real nice.
I'm not there for it.
So after he gets done, I read that like quote when he's on the broadcast when V is broadcasting to all stations. They immediately they started to spin it right afterwards, and they talked about like the need to combat that message of hate. Did you guys catch that? They called it a message
yeah.
of hate,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like,
Yep. I wrote that down
A
too.
terrorist against unarmed civilians to spread a message
Yes.
of hate. It's just like, oh, it's keywords.
Can-
It's all the keywords you need.
can you
Like,
believe
Right.
that? Man, it's like so on. And that the dead voice of London, sorry Shag, but the dead voice of London ends up being a major stockholder in pharma. I mean, it's like it's unreal. It's unreal.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah,
what were you gonna
it's like, again. Well, I was gonna say again, it like how on the nose this movie is like it almost seems like I want to be like, no,
Yeah.
it's not, just wake up.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way that that's real, and and
the
the
girl
more
was like, hey, let's do that.
yeah, no, exactly. Like this wasn't just like you like all this Orwellian stuff coming out. You're like, this is not supposed to be a guide. It's supposed to be a warning. Like
Right.
you can't. But and that's the thing, and really what I guess like what gives me hope and also terrifies me about the world today is, and you kind of said something about like like almost everyone shows up in London there, and I don't know that will ever, as much as I have faith in people coming together in this way, it will be a much harder, longer fight. And that, I guess that's what scares me, because I see like people talk about cancel culture online, like people who I know in real life have like sworn me off. And that hurts deeper. I could give a shit less what people, faceless morons on the internet, have to say. They could swear into the ether all they want. It's when I lose people who I grew up with, family members that, we used to break bread with, all of a sudden don't want to, have a conversation based on lies. And this is the discouraging part, is that when you look at what's happening now, you're talking about like a 51-49% split in people. Like, that's terrifying. Media companies, they're so giant that they amplify small voices so loud that you think that it's hard to tell the difference between who's like the provocateur and who means well. It's a really kind of, I don't know. I don't ever mean to be doom and gloom, but sometimes like reality sets in and I think this is a long fight, and people need to realize it's a marathon, not a sprint. And obviously this movie is the sprint, right? I mean, it takes place over a year basically. But, and we haven't reached certain points that they have, but it's close. When people talk about, when news and these government figures talk about replacing unvaccinated workers with vaccinated military, like that's the beginning, right? That's the acceptance that, I'm sorry, well, police are just going to be around all the time now. Military is going to be around all the time now. Guns are going to be around all the time now. Like, that's the beginning, right? Then it's guys driving around in vans listening to everything that's going on. It's, actual armed guards surrounding people, your presidents or chancellors or whoever they are. It's hard not to go down that rabbit hole of like, is this a blueprint for what's happening, or is this the antidote to what's happening? And I hope that our discussion here is the beginning of people seeing the movie again. I hope people do watch it again, because I think it's an important cultural movie that I think started as fun and now is more of like a, oh, wait a minute, you know. So
Yeah,
Yeah, and
go ahead. Sorry, Russ.
I just wanted to say quickly, like, first of all, you're not alone. You probably already know that, but you're not alone, Shag. Like, Prax and I have also both like lost friends during this time, and not because they died of COVID, but because they went insane, and now
Right.
they won't talk to us anymore.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have been dealing with that. Fortunately, which I think Prax alluded to earlier, and you were talking about, you don't need everybody. In fact,
Right.
you don't even need a majority. You need like 5 or 10%, because you can see it in the way that mask mandates and all the things are going right now. Like 80% of the population is just whichever way the wind blows. They don't care. They just whatever gets them through their life. They're just happy to do that. So you only need 5 or 10% of people to stand up and be loud enough and have enough of a presence to push back, and then the dominoes fall the other direction instead.
Right.
And that's sort of like the hopeful thing to remember is you don't need 50%, you don't need 80%, you don't need 100%.
I guess that's also that's also one of the things that's scary too. Well, it's hopeful and scary because I feel like we're seeing the pendulum pulled back so far one way. And you spoke of like black-pilled libertarians, is that you have people like that who are thinking the only way out of this is violence. You know, like people trying to wield the darkness for good, and it's like we have to be careful because, you know, the things that are being weaponized right now, they're wrong, they're morally abhorrent, and we need to like and again, it's all based on these like weird lies. Like almost we're like 300 days or 290 days into 15 days to slow the spread, and masks and shit like that. It's like, when does it stop? You know, when do people do finally like snap out of it? And when they do, will people be thinking, oh wait, I've been screwed over so long, guess what, your turn now. And you see it a lot, and I don't mean to get into this particular, but you see it a lot now with like racial politics. Like, well, we've been, you know, the people saying that, well, we were discriminated against so long, so guess what, whitey, it's your turn, or whatever group they decide.
Yeah.
You know. And like, again, the pendulum swings back the other way. Doesn't, and that's why we can't give up the liberties, because we give it up to them, then it, you know, when the power switches, you know, it's gonna be the same story all over again with different colors.
Yeah, and
So,
I think I don't want to get off onto a new movie, because we'll have to come back and cover Lord of the Rings at some point.
Oh yeah.
But basically, all those black-pilled people are Boromir. They're just like,
Yeah.
no. We need to take the ring for ourselves. That's how we can fix everything.
yeah.
And no,
Great point.
Mm-hmm.
it's not how it works.
Yeah.
I cut you off earlier. If you want to go ahead, or Shag, whatever.
go
Sorry,
ahead.
man.
No, go ahead, Bryce.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about that line. You know, while the truncheon may be used in lieu of conversation. I mean, help me out, Rez, but is it Hapa who says that conversation is proof we prefer words over violence?
Yeah, that's his argumentation ethics.
Yeah, argumentation ethics, right? So the reason we try to convince each other is because eventually we'll devolve into violence if we don't, right?
We'd
Yeah.
rather do that than hit each other.
Yeah, we'd rather do that. Yeah,
It's more profitable.
more
to do that.
profitable. Yeah, and that's why I think it's so crazy once you've been on a steady diet of like long form conversation podcasts, like a Rogan diet, you know, where you really let ideas breathe and there's real like good faith disagreement and people are in search of the truth. And then like you're like in an environment where like just the news is on randomly and you're like, there's 6 heads on this screen competing for 10 seconds of airtime, and the whole topic is going to have 3 to 5 minutes max. It's
And
like,
people
yeah.
watch it.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
And,
it's
okay.
nuts. I mean, it's nuts to think that like that passes for discourse. That's not discourse. No one is. Very few people are looking for truth in that arena. They're trying to program others and let them know what to think. Definitely not how to think about something. Not all sides of the story. And they all want to present themselves as fair and balanced, no matter which outlet they are. And they're just. That's not what that is. That's eyeballs for advertising. That's all it is.
Yeah. Yeah. When I remember watching the Rogan and Sanjay Gupta podcast, and I really liked it because like I've watched Rogan for years now,
Yeah.
and he truly is a pioneer because he is I mean, he's definitely a liberal, and people get it wrong all the time, right? Like, oh, he's alt right, whatever. And you're like, what? The guy is like a UBI shill, dude.
Yeah,
Like all he
yeah,
talks about is like universal basic income, etc. Like he's for big government to some extent.
yeah.
And and I watched that show and I thought, wow, Gupta is like, he's brave, man, because CNN has not been kind to. I feel like he hasn't been kind to Joe in the past. Like they've made comments about him and the stuff he's done, and they're just, I don't know, enough about CNN. But what I liked about the discussion was that he pressed him hard enough that he didn't come off as disrespectful. It was just, hey, you guys said this and this is wrong, and he, without giving up too much ground, he basically said, yeah, what they said was inaccurate and they shouldn't have said that and blah blah blah. And I thought, this is great. This is the good faith, like, debate, or not debate, the good faith discussion that people need to start to see. They need to see people, from these networks that constantly take shit out of context and clip culture everything. And while Don Lemon and CNN are not like wrong in saying that ivermectin is a horse dewormer, they're being intellectually dishonest, like a lot of people are when they discuss this stuff. It's important to know that it's a Nobel Prize winning drug that was used on humans, blah 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 blah. And of course he goes back to his network and he can't hold up his end of the bargain. It totally denying the gentleman's conversation, like, hey, this actually took place, and hold on, Don, you made a mistake. It is blah, Instead, he doubles down and screws it over, and that's unfortunate. And that's where, like, and I watch a lot of man on the street stuff, and you guys, I'm sure you guys don't. I mean, I don't know what you watch, but like Charlie Kirk, I know he's very a provocateur in many ways, but I like watching some of his man on the street stuff where he like sits at universities and just like talks to people, because his point of like, if we can't like have political dissent or social dissent, like, then we're going to spiral into violence. And I think, yes, exactly, because then you don't talk, and then you just get angry, and then you lash out at people. When we saw a whole summer of like burning cities down, peaceful protests. I'm sorry. Like this is the issue, like, and this is what Joe does so well. And you're right. I can't watch any news. I can't watch conservative news. I can't watch liberal news, because all they do is they try and squeeze in an entire conversation in 30 seconds, no nuance. And we're used to watching 3 hours of conversation back and forth and understanding like the human element to the discussion, because we're all nuanced. Like where you guys live and where I live, they're two different places. You guys interact with different people that I interact with. Do we need blanket policy to dictate what all of us do? No, probably not.
Yeah.
So it is weird. It's weird trying to consume any sort of news now, especially after, I mean, all the podcasts I listen to are at least an hour and a half long. It's strange that I'll consume something under an hour.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too. I think news has actually even gotten worse in the sense that they used to try and squeeze, like, I remember like Hannity and Combs, where it actually would be like they would try and argue something. They would actually try and argue even though it was only a minute long or whatever. And now, just like Dave Smith just played that most recent like Fauci interview, where the setup for the question is just like, we already verified that you're correct and that Rand Paul isn't, and he called you a liar, but we know you're not a liar. Anyways, right. Dr. Fauci, are you a liar? No. All right. Go to commercial. Like, that's it. Like, right. Like, it's just pure loaded setup so that 30 seconds can just be nothing but confirmation bias in this loaded question. It's unbelievable.
Well, they do talk about that in the movie too, don't they? Don't they? They trying to think of the line now, but that's part of. That was, of course, as soon as I want to talk about it, my mind's like.
Well, there's a part where there's the news broadcast going out, and the camera shows those hearing the broadcast, and they're like, bollocks, you believe this shite? There are people who are just disagreeing with it. I just don't know to what extent that people still disagree with the bollocks that's coming out of the, arbiters of allowed opinion. The only thing that's given me a lot of hope that there is still discerning, country class of citizen out there is the Let's Go Brandon movement. I mean, that's the thing that's given me hope that, like, you know, I may not understand. What does V say? He says, like, there's something wrong with this country.
Hmm.
And I think that that's at the level of, like, the Let's Go Brandon, like, thought is behind. Is like, I don't know what the answer is, but I know that this is not it, and I know there's something wrong.
The when he says too, I meant to say this a little earlier, but when V says that you need only look in the mirror, what I love about that line is that it speaks to the ruling class. It speaks to those people in that room below the chancellor, but it speaks to every single individual person. And I don't think, and I've said this many times on, like, my podcast, or the podcast I'm on every week, like, freedom is an expensive thing,
Mm.
and most people are not willing to pay the price for it, and that is the issue. We've been bamboozled into thinking that the government will provide these things for us and everything. So, especially now, right? You've been kept out of work, you've been told you can't go outside, you can't go to the gym, can't take care of yourself. Big Daddy government's gotcha, and then they don't deliver. But, like, we put it there. You just got to look in the mirror. We are the ones, maybe not us, but we are the ones that allowed this to happen. We are the ones that are going to fix it. The first step in fixing a problem is admitting there is one. It's some of the stuff is so patronizing and, like obvious, but it comes at tremendous personal sacrifice, and people don't get that. I teach kids between the ages of 18 and, like, 23, 24, and it's amazing to, like when they hear stuff like this. Some of them are a little bit awake and they understand, but a lot of them, they're almost offended when I say it. When I tell them I don't owe them an education, when I tell them I don't owe them anything, they're like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't, like, it's your job to hear what I'm saying, take it, and either use it or not. You're an adult, you're a big boy, big girl. Do your thing. It's not my job to tell you what to think. It's my job to tell you the process of thinking and how to come to your own conclusions." And I was like, that's the beauty of the world. It's like, you want to be the next Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos? You want to have this multi-trillion-dollar industry? Well, go out and work for it. Stop making excuses. Stop waiting for someone to hand you a check.
Mm-hmm.
Again, look in the mirror. You're probably the problem. You're probably the reason you can't get out of your own goddamn way. And it is cool to watch the light bulb go on, even if it's for 30 seconds. But that's why that line was so beautiful, because it was so true. It speaks more to the common man than it does to, like, that ruling class, because the ruling class isn't changing. They're not, the world is built for them. But it's our job to take personal responsibility and try and break the chain as best we can.
It's funny because normally, we frequently play the "Freedom Isn't Free" song on this channel from Team America, which is
Team
another movie
America?
we'll have to cover at some point because it's incredible. It's even better now. Aged like a fine wine for sure.
Yeah.
But I just sent you Anatomy of the State today, and you listened to that. And
Man.
it's interesting when you bring up those things about democracy. That's one of the major differences between what's happening now and what's happening in the movie. Is they are fortunate enough in a way to have an actual dictatorship where they get to focus. It's this guy or this handful of people, this oligarchy, are the problem. But the function of democracy has been to obfuscate who's to blame, to the point where the state will just go, well, it's all your fault,
Right.
And people will be like, yeah, that's why we just that's where I'm a little worried about. I want Let's Go Brandon to be real, but I'm worried too many of them are like, yeah, let's go Brandon. We got to get Trump back in there, and it's like,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
no,
Yeah.
that isn't it.
Right.
You were so close, but no.
Right.
right.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I thought it was so cool. I didn't realize this. So I was, like, kind of looking up the IMDb, and I don't know why I didn't recognize it, but, like, my wife hadn't ever read 1984 or seen the film, and so
Oh yeah.
we finally broke down and watched it, and then I was like, "Holy cow!" They had John Hurt come play essentially the big brother character in this film. I thought that was so cool how they gave him a
Right.
chance to show his depth that way. which is
Yeah.
awesome. He nailed it too.
I think,
Gosh.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of those like cool Easter eggs in that movie. I think is like, I mean, it's been so long since because he was a young man when
Yeah.
he
Right.
did that in 1984. So like seeing it now, you're like, ha ha, I see what you
Yeah.
did there.
Winston
Clever.
loved Big Brother, and then he became Big Brother.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's literally just the sequel to 1984. He just grew up to become the Chancellor.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Any
Well, let me.
significance in? Go ahead. You got. Go ahead.
Sure. I was just gonna say. So if you want to keep talking about, if you got something else you want to talk about, Prax, that's fine. But I was gonna say, if anyone hasn't mentioned their favorite scene yet, I'd love to hear what your favorite scene is in the movie. You gotta pick one. You gotta narrow it down. The whole movie doesn't count.
I need a moment.
I'll start. It's
Okay.
I for me it is always, I always get goosebumps at the end when because it's not so much about the blowing up the building, but it's like it's this longing for this feeling of success. Like they did it. They got there. And when they all pull their masks off, it's like they just found freedom. They beat the enemy. It's done. It's been won. And I want that feeling so bad. So I've just like rewatched that scene times in my life just because it makes me feel a little bit better. Like just to even emulate what that feels like. They reached it. Or it's the same with the collapse of Barad-dûr in Lord of the Rings, like coming down. Like they did it. They won. So we have to cover Lord of the Rings too. But yeah, that's definitely my favorite scene in the movie.
One's I think there's so many good setups and payoffs in the film, even though you kind of know, like, they let you kind of know what to expect, except for a few big reveals, like V being her captor and stuff. Um, but I like how they managed to keep, again, the pacing so good. Like, who is it? The inspector. What's his name again?
Finch.
Finch. You know, he's narrating what's going to happen as it happens. Like something's going to do something stupid, right? And then we watch the stupid thing happen, and that's the spark that sets it off, right? And so I think that's just great screenplay. But my favorite scene, I'm gonna go back to from a dialogue perspective. It's the one I read when V is doing his broadcast, trying to motivate people to reconvene. He has to very quickly because you know they're beating down doors. He does a good job of
Tight editing.
what's that?
Tight editing.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah. He does a great job of getting his message out there, laying out the problem, laying out the why, assigning blame appropriately, talking people, talking that convincing people they need to reflect on their own personal responsibility, but then also remove those in power who are responsible for the problem. So from a dialogue perspective, that's definitely my favorite. But I think it's an awesome action scene at the end, where in terms of action, where he gets down. Doesn't he like basically say my hands will be on your neck or something like that, and then he does it, and how the last bullet runs out. I thought that was awesome.
So for me, so I took note of that scene, obviously with the with Finch kind of explaining what would happen, and again, it was just like, why are they retelling our recent history?
Yeah.
Because like I equate that scene with like George Floyd, like in Derek Chauvin, like that whole thing happened, and it just like it was like powder keg, like that whole thing just resparked that movement, and it caused a lot of issues with cities all around the world or all around the United States. I just think that was the stupid thing that happened, and people rallied behind it, and of course, while it was an awful thing to happen, there's a lot of lies surrounding it, or mistruths, if you will. But yeah, that was definitely one of my like favorite, like sort of like how it was edited and presented. But I think like the scene that made me feel this is hard, man. One scene, um, I'm you know what? I'm going to go against what you said. I'm going to give you two because it's just too important to me.
Cut him.
The very, the very first scene that we meet V in the back alley, and he's kind of like he just has so many long lines, like that
Mm.
whole like explanation of who he is, and oh, I'm just
Voila.
commenting on the paradox of asking a masked man who he is, and huh,
It's very
like,
endearing. Yeah.
but yeah, like that whole scene was so beautiful. It was poetic, even,
Yes.
it was. But I think like one of the scenes that had a lot of gravity to it for me, and I'm sure a lot of people missed this, but it was beautiful, is when he kills the female doctor,
Oh yeah.
and
Mhm.
he's like, she's just laying, or she wakes up and sits up, and he's there, and she says, "Is it meaningless to apologize?"
Yes.
And he said, he just says no, or
Never.
never, or something. And
Mhm.
I thought that was such a good line. And I've spent the last 4 years being a dad of two young boys, and I always think of them when I see movies and I see like really heavy scenes like this, because something as simple as, is it meaningless to apologize? It's never meaningless to apologize. You might not be forgiven. Like, these are the lessons you teach your young ones. Like, this is how you make change in the world, right? Like, people are waiting for broad sweeping policy
Mm.
changes to be passed among the most corrupt people in the world. But like, this is the difference maker. It is never too late to apologize. Your fate is sealed and you're being judged. And we're all going to get to that point. But it was such a beautiful scene that I did not appreciate, I think, until I've gone through what I've gone through with my kids. Like, it's the most beautiful thing in the world to raise children. It's the hardest thing in the world to raise children. But those are the lessons that you that
Testify.
you right. It was great. I think that's probably my favorite scene besides the very first scene that we meet V. I thought that was really cool. But
Thanks for bringing that up. And I think that's one another way that this movie stands out is that I think good films allow for the evil people to be redeemed in some capacity. You know,
sure.
it's not it's not always. I feel like the modern film we have today, it's like just the bad guys are like comically bad, and the good guys are like comically good in a lot of cases. And like, no doubt, she was a monster, and the experiments that she justified were, deserving of death. Definitely because of all the deaths that she caused and justified in her mind. But what a beautiful piece of storytelling to give her that moment, to shine and show her humanity and to show her remorse. I
Hmm.
mean, that's brilliant. I love that. Great call out.
So something I'll just say as an aside that, and I think it's important point that you made about like, I think good films, they bring humanity to the antagonist, right? I think those are like the best movies out there. And I will probably get a rash of shit from everyone for saying this, but this is actually why I enjoy the new Star Wars movies. Not because Rey is an awful protagonist. I do not love the Mary Sue archetype. I think, there's nothing good about it. Like, there's what did you overcome?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
but to me, the enjoyment I got out of that story was watching Kylo Ren's arc, because he was an extremely disturbed person with a broken past. He deals with even like Luke Skywalker's conflict of the Force, and you watch him go from this like bad person who did terrible things to this ultimate conflict within him throughout the movies. Now, were the movies good? No, but I enjoyed his particular arc because it was like the only arc in those movies. Ray didn't really have an arc, but like, you see, I mean, at the end, like, Kylo Ren ultimately saves the day. Now, I don't want to get into those movies too much, but that he was a villain in that movie, but you leveled with him on a human level.
Mm.
That's what was important. Same thing with like Thanos and Infinity War. You understood the internal struggle he was going through, and at the end, you kind of felt bad for him. If you have a soul, anyway, I feel like they justify his actions. It might not be what you agree with, but there's still something behind it. Um, and it's something that's lost on a lot of writing nowadays.
Hmm.
And I just watched a fantastic um, video from the Drinker, Critical Drinker. I don't know if
Yeah.
you guys follow him, but he talks about that, like why modern movies suck is largely because conflict and resolution in modern films is like a bunch of kicking and screaming babies, and they fight and they punch each other and they swear at each other. Where, and he uses Star Trek to sort of reference these things, and he's 100% right. Is in the past you had gentlemen, you had men of honor who stood up, and even though they were ideological, like ideologically different, they found a way to connect each other on a human level,
Hmm.
and you understood where they were coming from, whether they were right or wrong. Now it's just like, I like you, meh, meh, meh. It's so different. But I agree with, and that's, I guess that's what made this scene so powerful, is that she came to terms with the awful thing that she had done and tried to make amends the best she could, and she ran as long as she could. And I think, and she knew that ultimately she would pay the ultimate price with her life. And but it was just such a beautiful scene, really, really great scene.
Yeah, she seems almost relieved, and it
Right.
also gives V the chance to show his mercy as well.
Hmm.
It's not going to be
Yeah.
painful. It's already
Right.
done. You don't have to worry about it.
I'm gonna throw a little bit of counterpoint into here, and if I'm off base, that's fine. But I think it's actually it's a great scene, but I think a little bit it shows that V is actually kind of not a hero and a little bit unredeemable. Um, Before Evie is a little bit worried by him when she finds out he just keeps killing people, and so she runs away, and then immediately after that, he kills the bishop, and she runs away. But then I'm pretty sure that Delia is the next person he kills. And this is a person who is nothing but remorseful and doesn't even beg for her life. She just says, please, basically says, please forgive me. And in this moment, he could say, all right, I forgive you, and not kill her. He could do that. There's nothing to really be gained by killing her. She's not, she's a coroner right now. She's not one of the people who are doing these things. She's spent her entire life from that point feeling terrible, feeling like she needs to atone for these things, whereas everyone else has just profited from it. But he kills her anyways.
Hmm.
So I feel like that seems a little bit of a mixed bag in that way.
Yeah, I could see that. I think that that, like Prax was saying about how it was a painless death, like everyone
Mm-hmm.
else seemed to die a pretty awful death, by his like literal hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I I think, the impetus is, her I'm sorry, Evie leaving and him realizing like, oh, like what I'm doing is pretty awful. Like,
Hmm.
it makes him sort of question his own standards, and I think that leads into him not only killing her the way he did, but also maybe even realizing he needed to sacrifice himself at the end. Like he's gonna actually have to lay down his life for this. It's like, you know, the more important thing is the message. Like I am willing to give myself up for this. Other people need to be willing to give themselves up for this. Like so,
Right.
if
I
that
think
had not happened, it wouldn't have gone that way.
right. I think it's a hero to an anti-hero. It's not a hero to a villain. That
Right.
you might think like he's just going to kill all the bad guys, and then you come up with this person who did terrible things but is clearly remorseful, and he kills her too. And you're like, okay, he did do that, and then I think he realizes, like, along with Evie too, like, all right, I also can't be redeemed. This is not my world. This is not for me to kill everyone and be like, no, I'm not. This is not the world I'm supposed to live in. I need to die with everyone else because I am also I am also guilty. I
Right.
am also a sinner, basically.
Hmm.
I look at V's motivation as being far beyond his own suffering. I think he lays at the feet of those he kills the blame for all of St. Mary's and all of Three Waters and the 100,000 people. So even if V were to forgive her in that moment, I think he still has to. I think he feels his path is laid out for him to avenge, to finish the vendetta for not just himself, but for the others who are in a mass grave.
Hmm.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Let me pick out since Shag did too, there's just one other scene I was gonna mention that it's funny to me because this is like the same scene. This scene has happened to everyone who has been red pilled in a way, and it's the one when he's literally been up all night, and he just goes and gets that water and I can't remember the dude's name. It's not Dascom. It's his like a lieutenant or whatever. Comes in or whatever, and he puts the thing up. And he's just like, I just gotta talk to you. I just gotta tell you a story. I just need you to listen, and I need you to not tell anyone that I told you about this. Like everyone, we all had this moment. If you're fortunate enough to have a spouse, it's your spouse. And it's just like, I just need you to sit down and listen, and not tell anyone when we talked about this. But I gotta say all these things out loud to someone else. And we all had that, and I love that that moment. Or it's like it's only water because there's not liquor in this office, basically.
I wonder.
That movement was definitely with my best friend. That took place with my best friend. I don't usually talk politics with my wife. I do in a very roundabout sort of way, just because it's not something that she loves, but she sees like a lot of the lunacy happening in the world, and we laugh about it in our own way. But I've definitely had that moment with my best friend on the way home from work or something, where I'm just like, I need you to shut up because I'm gonna put a bullet in my brain.
I need to confirm that the world is actually crazy and it's not me.
Right. Yep.
So, I wonder, back 2005 is ancient history now. Like, they made this probably with the BBC in mind as being like the central like broadcast unit, but like this is almost like pre-internet in a way. Like when you talk about 2005, yeah, the internet was out, but like I bet you a lot of people were still using like AOL and stuff. Like, when was Facebook actually starting to become a thing? Like, I think
Around then.
yeah, around then.
It was just for colleges and
Just
you could
for
hook
colleges,
people and there
like-
was a wall.
Guys, this movie was made before like the internet as we know it, and like that's insane when you think about. I wonder what might be different about it if they made it today, and how they would represent the level of censorship. Because even though like the mainstream, the corporate press still has a massive voice and influence on the culture, I think that's changing as the younger generation gets older and goes to different places for their content. I wonder if they would change it at all today and how they try to represent that world.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Hollywood is just like a vehicle for culture. Like I mean, you just look at how movies have changed over, or anything, comics have changed over the past just 10 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
It's like, it's weird to talk about because when you watch channels that are critical of the mainstream Hollywood like movies and everything, everyone thinks like you're just an angry fanboy, or like, why don't you have an open mind? Like, it's like no one is mad that there's different, like there's like diversity in a film, or that there's certain cultural elements of like sexuality and all that. Like it's been present forever. Like the strong female character didn't just pop up all of a sudden. There've been plenty of them over the years. I mean, Samus, like from Metroid, is like the very first, like everyone's, I mean, at least one of my first crushes, like like when that like it's just like,
And
this
she's
isn't
based
a
off
new
Ripley.
concept, right? And and like these are not new concepts, but somehow we need more of it. They need to be super powerful. They need to demean all men that they come across, and it's weird, but it's just the norm. You see something come out, like almost all of them, because in the name of DIE, you need to have all this stuff. You need to check off all your boxes, and then it's really important to make sure that if there's any sort of I don't really want to say what I'm going to say, but if there's people who look like us in that movie, they need to be put in their place really quickly, so they know that they're not important, that they shouldn't be mansplaining, they shouldn't be doing anything. And it's weird. Like that's like all this stuff had existed before, but not, again, they beat you over the head with it like a sledgehammer. And that's what people are done with.
Yeah.
You know that, and so I feel like if this movie were remade now, we'd be seeing a lot of that, and we would be seeing this censorship and stuff as more of a parody than a warning. You know, like like I don't. They would deliver it in a way that was like, ha ha ha, like censorship. You know, like I mean, anytime one of us or someone of our ilk mentions censorship, it's like it's freedom of speech, not freedom of consequences. You know, it's like, dude, you're missing the
Yeah,
point,
yeah,
bro.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean? It's just it's such a weird thing, and I'm glad this movie was made when it was, and I think that's why I'm surprised that the Wachowski sisters wrote it, even when they did, because this was like pretty much the end of the Matrix trilogy, original Matrix trilogy, and I believe their transition had already started or was on its way. So I feel like it was made now. I don't know if those identity politics would show through too much. And I'm surprised they didn't then, because everyone says like, oh, the Matrix is an allegory for transgenderism and, you know, coming out of the closet and all that. And I think I don't know about that. It seems more like
Yeah.
I mean,
No.
I've read that several times now, and maybe it's just
It
because
sounds
of
like
the
a
time.
retcon.
Right.
I mean, as a side note, the Switch character in that movie is meant to sort of represent that.
Right, that makes sense.
Larry, I think the first one was Andy Wachowski to transition, said that in that movie he wanted the to be a male actor in the real world and a female actor in the movie or in the
Right.
Matrix, but they wouldn't let him do that, so they just picked that very androgynous person to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I also just wanted to say, as a side note, it is a marvel, pun intended, that we got to Endgame. Like we had some a little bit of things, you know. Captain Marvel's not great, but overall the story made it. It made it like 10 years. As the world got crazier and crazier, the right people managed to just hang on long enough to give this epic saga a good conclusion. And now it's all gone to shit since then. But
Well, No Way Home could probably be a good one. No Way Home is something, the only one I'm looking forward to. I think they're holding on with the Spider-Man trilogy, and like once that's done, I think you're gonna see a.
Maybe I haven't seen the second two Spider-Mans because I just sort of like once Endgame happened, I was like, the universe should just end here. This was good. Let's move on to something else. This is complete.
I agree.
We don't need anything else. And then you know, like as you were just saying about mansplaining and making sure that men don't save the day, I had read back when WandaVision came out that Doctor Strange is supposed to be in that.
Oh yeah,
because it's about multiverses and things like that. He was supposed to be the person who explains something to either explains or exposes something to Wanda or to deal with Agatha or something like that. And they're like, it was Kevin Feige who literally said like, we didn't want a man coming in and telling the woman like what to think or something like that. I was like, oh my God,
Jeez.
You just threw away the story for identity politics. So
and the irony of a man explaining why a man can't come in to yeah. And the weird part about that show too is just like people celebrating a woman torturing an entire, like mentally torturing an entire town. Like,
right.
What a hero!
Oh yeah.
What a hero for love.
Yeah.
That's why I love the drinker. Whenever he brings that one up, it was like they'll never know what you sacrificed. The Tyrion vomiting every time afterwards.
Yeah.
Right. Oh man.
So another one that was a little too close to home was some believed it was God himself, but pharma made them extremely rich. I mean, this goes to like who's the stand-in for Como now, saying like this vaccine's from God. Shit, it's too much. And then you brought up Jordan Peterson's comment about saying that the Chancellor in the comedy, right? In the comedy that old homeboy ended up getting black bagged for. What was his
Jordan
name?
Dietrich.
Yeah, Dietrich. Like,
Yep.
in that one, you know, he made it funny. People were genuinely laughing because the exploding cigars and the Chancellor was the actual terrorist. And
Benny Hill. British
Benny
love
Hill.
Benny Hill.
Yeah, and you know he got black bagged for it. You know, and that's killing the jester. You know that is when the jester can't speak truth through comedy, and it just shows that the jester in art, at least Dave Smith had a recent episode featuring John Stewart, and just like his absolute fall from grace in terms of like using comedy to speak truth to power. And now he's just like come back out of retirement to be in the tank for this by comparing his segment compared like they asked what's more Hitler is like this funny like
Mhm.
parody of what's more Hitler, is it actual Hitler or COVID, and it's just this false choice, this false comparison, where they were comparing people who were like maybe questioning the COVID regime and the whole narrative around it as being like pro COVID, like on the side of the virus, and like, bro, we're not on the side of the virus, and then to get put that false choice up there and say, well, that's like saying, are you which one is more Hitler, the virus because it killed more people, or Hitler because he killed more people? It's like that's not what we're talking about here, man. And so it's like in the film, the jester was killed for trying to speak truth through comedy, and in our life, it's in some ways it's worse than that because other than a few standouts, you know,
We're almost out of jesters,
yeah, right.
and they're trying to kill the ones who are still trying to be jesters.
Yeah, Rogan and Chappelle. Am I canceled? I love that clip.
Hmm.
Other than that, like, where are they at? And this goes back to like this idea that if you were to try to, it was easier to create this film in 2005 because it was a pushback on Bush and 9/11 and his response in the Middle East. But would they have the guts to make it today? When it's more difficult. That like, we listen to some folks who are like, yeah, the people who are like, pro COVID regime today, they probably would have been pro slavery in 1860 because that was the zeitgeist. That was what people believed across the board. It was the norm, right? If you were an abolitionist back in 1860, you were some fringe weirdo who didn't understand human nature. You know,
Right.
And those are
Yeah.
the people who, it's like Jordan Peterson said, those are the Nazi prison guards. Like those,
right?
the people who imagine themselves or not are absolutely those people.
Just doing our job.
And it's this really sad thing that we've gone through, where we've had our people who were our friends purge us, but it's actually like it's been painful, but it's really for the best because we didn't realize it at the time, but those are the people who are going to put us on a boxcar
Hmm.
if,
Yeah.
if it came down to it. We didn't realize it. We thought they were our friends, but now we know that they weren't, and so we're making new friends and we're finding people who actually would go to bat for us. We've it's been a kind of a cleansing fire. It's been really painful, but it's also been helpful, and we're going to be better for it on the other side.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't make it any easier for sure,
Right.
And I think, and it as easier as this becomes, in a lot of ways it gets harder because you're talking about killing the jester, and you look at someone like Chappelle, and that his recent stand up where he makes jokes at the expense of a certain community, and tells the story of a friend who took their own life, largely from what I understand because they were being shamed for defending him in his previous special. And this is the community that like shouts that words are violence
Right.
and turns and uses the they use it in the same way that they don't want to be talked to, and it's heartbreaking, man. It's heartbreaking to watch this stuff happen, and people not like, do you not see that this is wrong? Do you not see that like words are not violence? Like, it's one thing to have your feelings hurt, but like to try and take a member of your own community down? Like, when did groupthink become trendy? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
It's just, it's so, like I said earlier, like I think the only time that like groupthink really comes into play is in like your immediate community. Like everyone on my street like has a rifle of some kind. Like I feel comfortable like on my street and safe because I know everyone is armed to the teeth. Like
That's
great
awesome.
group think there. I'm good, you know.
Montana.
Look, right. it's it's but that's what I mean. You stick in your local community. You stick on the lower level. We're at this point where everyone's like, no, we got to think. And the irony is that they fight against these like MAGA weirdos
Hmm.
who are like pro gun, pro America. But it's like you're in your own cult, and you're expecting everyone to be in lockstep with you. Like you're the very thing that you're fighting against. You
Hmm.
know, it's just so bizarre, and why people don't break it down into smaller pieces. Like why everyone's so afraid to be their own individual and to protect their own liberties. Like now that I've like done so much reading and watched thousands of hours of videos on stuff, like I think why aren't more people thinking like this? I know they are now more than ever, but how is this? How are we the weirdos? How are we like the conspiracy theorists? You know, it it's just strange. I have hope. I have hope, and I'm thankful to meet people like yourselves and the community I've made since my own red pilling happened. And I have found that I've met much more genuine people along the way.
Hmm.
Like I can actually like I even search out uncomfortable conversations. Like I plan on having a conversation with a very progressive Twitch streamer at some point this month. You know, it will be extremely uncomfortable getting into that arena with a bunch of progressive gamers, like, you know, going at me. You know, it's like, well, I'm not here to tell you you're right or wrong. I'm here to like steel man your argument. Like, okay, let's talk about what you think is right, and allow me to tell you why I think it's wrong. You know, I'm sick of watching the straw man arguments happen across the board. You know, the low hanging fruit, the intellectually lazy. It's just, I'm done with it. Like I need more. I need to feel that discomfort because I think it's the only way we break out of this whole thing and we extend that circle out.
That's great, Shag. I try to practice, the old phrase, seek first to understand, then be understood. And I'd love to come listen to that, by the way. So I'll be asking you for details
And
later.
back you up.
Yeah, I'd back you
Yeah.
up.
Make sure you know you got some friendlies in the audience.
Yeah, but
Thanks.
I think the only reason I am where I am today in terms of my thinking is because back then I used to, and I hope I still do. I try to still do this. Enter into every conversation with the possibility that I might be wrong and that I
Yeah.
might end up convinced of someone who it becomes pretty clear if someone is coming from a place of good faith and principle. And if I
Mhm.
can tell that that person, even if I disagree with their principles or their starting points or their presuppositions, at least I can understand their framework and their way of thinking. And I think that
Right.
adds a ton to people's humanity, and it helps us get away from the dangerous trending towards violence tendency of depersoning or othering a group of people for their thinking.
Yeah.
And there's a line in the movie too where that I love from Finch in that same thing where I gotta talk you over, and and is the lieutenant, I wish I could remember his name, whatever. He says like, but we know that they were extremists did it, they were caught, they confessed, and he says, and they were executed, and maybe that's what happened.
Mm.
Maybe that's what really happened. But I see all these other things. Like he's got that, like, okay, maybe it really is that maybe I am crazy. You give that leeway, like maybe I am crazy. That would be awesome. It would be really awesome that it's just me,
Right.
because that's way easier to deal with than everyone else is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about it all the time, and I appreciate that line. Like I want to be wrong. Please let me be wrong. Let the government be this perfect benevolent entity that just loves us and is just trying to do the right thing for us. Let that be. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
But I
That's
see these
honestly.
coincidences, these things happening together that I have to ask: is that really what's happening?
Yeah. That's where my red pilling started because I was like, what's weird is to see that like I go back at the evolution of my own ideas, and I think like where I am now is largely where I was growing up,
Hmm.
but over the time and that slow sort of like that slow burn, that slow turn to the other side was like I started asking questions like that, like maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe Trump isn't a racist. Okay, why is he a racist? And then the first thing that sticks out in everyone's mind is Charlottesville. And I remember going and looking at that tape. I'm like, he didn't say what they said. Like, okay, maybe it's just a coincidence, or maybe it's just a one-off thing. And the more I started, and this is not a defense of Trump by any means, but like, you can't ignore when lies happen, right? Like, and big lies. Like when someone when you're casting stones like transphobia and race and a racist or whatever, like you better have your shit in order. Like it's just those aren't we've what we've done over time is we have eroded the actual meaning. We've given less meaning to the people who are those things,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a shame. And same thing with a lot of other things, but like that in particular was really the start of it all, because I thought this maybe that is the way of it. It could be, but then you start digging into things a little bit and realizing like objectively that was wrong. What they said was, I mean, edited out of context, and that's when things just kind of spiraled out of control. And I was just like, okay, so I can't trust anything that comes out of this news organization anymore. What else can I trust? And then before you know it, you're just sitting here like, great, now I look like the crazy one. Everyone just quotes what they're saying. What do I do? And then you start thinking, I'm an island, I'm alone.
Yeah.
And it's slow to network again with people, but certainly worth it. Like I said, I'd be willing to be wrong on a lot of things, and it feels good when I learn something new. Like, oh, I thought that's what it was, but I guess wrong. Like, cool, a new wrinkle in my brain. Sweet.
Yeah. I think as adults we get more and more prideful, and we tend to complicate things that, like, between the children's stories that I've already taught my 5-year-old, The Boy Who Cried Wolf and The Emperor's New Clothes. I mean, there's not much more you need to know about what's going on today than those two stories. The
Right.
institutions have lost their credibility because they say racist, racist, homophobe, homophobe, and it's like it's all losing meaning because they're, like you just called out, it's not what they're saying is not true. That and so it dulls us to actual occurrences of when there is a racist and all that stuff. And
Right.
people can look around, they can see the emperor is butt naked, but we're all pretending like he's not. And so
Yeah.
that makes us question everything, right? So that's my concern with this whole bout with this pandemic is like, what if there was a really bad one? What if there was like a
Yeah.
really bad virus? Like they're totally used up all of their currency of trust, and they burnt through it all. They got nothing left for the next one that people are going to just write them off. And then what if we're in big trouble? Then you know.
I think the same thing. Like, what happens when there is an airborne virus that actually kills people when you get it? Like,
What
no
happens
one's
when the
gonna
wolf
believe it.
is actually coming for the
Right,
sheep?
right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. No, it's yeah, it is truly, it's terrifying because again, we you we've entered a reality where we change the definition of words in real time,
Mm-hmm.
and was Amy Coney Barrett when she was being confirmed as a Supreme Court justice, they had changed the definition of a word. Like she said something, and then they immediately changed it. Like it was all over. Well, it was all over alt news, but no one's talking about it. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist." Like, and then the narrative becomes, "Well, everything's subjective. Like we made up that term, so we can change it as we need." Like what? And then the 2 + 2 = 5, and we're like, "What?" And you're left holding the bag. Like, you're just like, "Am I the crazy person?" Like, there's institutions like that are propped up for white supremacy. Wait a minute, I work a shit remedial job, and I don't make any money, and there's like what, like you're just caught in this web of lies that you just can't possibly escape.
Yeah.
And and there's no reasoning with a lot of the people that you're trying to reason with, and it they result to character attacks.
Right.
You can't attack ideas anymore, you just attack the person. Like, no, I don't think you're stupid. I think your idea is very stupid, and there's a big difference. I respect you as a human. I think your opinion sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Like that like when we can get to that point, when people can really, like, the words are violence, people, Like if they can realize it's like I love you as a human and I want to see you thrive. I don't want to see you put yourself in this one little teeny box. That's not who you are. There's a whole depth to your character and to the things you've done. You are not just this one thing. You are not a victim of any system. Like, if anything, I want you to break this system and I want you to do better than it.
Yeah.
Like, but then just, well, you're just transphobic. Like, oh my God.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Where are we?
Right. Right.
You've talked about the the discomfort, and that's the problem. Is most people don't want to run towards discomfort and suffering, even though that's what makes your life better.
Yeah.
And it's way easier to just buy into it isn't my fault, it's everyone else's fault. And the way we fix it is through the grand narrative. I just have to be a part of this movement, and we're gonna slay the dragon, and then I'm gonna get everything I need, rather than having to actually think about the little things in the bottom. And I thought this was interesting too. I don't know, Prax, if you happen to listen to Part of the Problem when he had Mark Clare on, or I don't know if Shag, if you listened to Part of the Problem with Dave Smith yet, highly recommend it. Libertarian
I will,
comedian.
but no,
Yeah, I did hear that one. I'm
yeah.
having a hard time remembering it.
He was arguing against the Mises Caucus, or a lot of people participating in the Libertarian Party, and I think I actually understood where he was coming from when he was talking about, like, you got these people here who are like, I don't have a job or a family, I can't afford to live anywhere, and I'm gonna join the Mises Caucus and Libertarian Party, and we're gonna fix everything. And it's like, oh yeah, there's actually people on our side too who still have that same destiny grand narrative. Like, all I've got to do is join this collective, even if it's the one who's more on the side of right or peace or love or liberty. Like, all I still have to do is join this collective and everything will be fine. Rather than Jordan Peterson, clean your room. Like, you got to start with you, clean your fucking room, bucko.
Bucko.
You know?
right.
Yeah.
So it happens to everybody. That's the crazy thing that I've learned over time is becoming a libertarian is like, oh, people here have some of the same problems. They've just latched on to a different collective way of thinking. They haven't got to the point where they're thinking on their own yet. Hopefully they get there, but I think that's also where we get that post-libertarianism thing again, where it's just they just latched onto the collective, and the collective isn't getting where they want anymore. So it's going to move on to the more iconoclastic one, the one that sounds better now. Like, yeah, let's kill those people. Okay, yeah, I like that idea. Let's go over there now. I follow that guy. So
I find myself still falling into this, like, because like I have like waves of, well, I don't know if it's waves of like creativity or like outspokenness, or I can't even think of the words right now, but like I love content creation. I like playing video games. Like, I run a very small Twitch channel, and it's fun. Like, I just play a variety of games when I want to, and I do some social commentary. I've made some YouTube videos on stuff that I'm like passionate about and things I think are wrong. But ultimately, I find like I'm still finding, like, I'm trying to like dip my toe in the water. I haven't quite jumped in yet because I'm afraid of the cost of what I'm about to do. You know, like, I want to commentate on a lot of things because there's never enough voices out there to, especially now. Like, I think more than ever, people need to speak up when they can, but that comes at a cost, that people will be exposed to it, that people will hate you for it, hate me for it. And I don't know if I have the conviction at the moment to like really to really jump in, because we make mistakes, right? Like, sometimes I find myself being like, well, maybe just this movement, or like, it's really hard to think on your own. It's really hard to reconcile all the information you get at any given time and apply it to you, right? Like, my comments on things are based on things that, like, on my own situations. I don't like to use the word, like, or the term personal truth necessarily, because I think it's been co-opted in a very poor manner.
Yeah.
But that's really, it's a very, very important thing to remember, is that what you guys have experienced in your life is not what I've experienced in my life. You know, I talk about this a lot when in the framework of police and law enforcement. Like, I grew up in a police home. My mom was a state cop for 20 years. She retired as a lieutenant colonel. You know, she's very high up. She's been in the politics of it. She's been beat cop. She's been a desk sergeant. She's been narcotics. I know through my own personal experiences that most of the police officers that I dealt with were good, upstanding, family loving people. There were some shitheads that I came across and people that my mom dated growing up, Marines that were total fucking assholes that, did awful things. But like the majority of them were fine, very fine people. but, but like, but I know that some people's experiences are not that. And I have to take that into consideration when I'm talking to certain people and understand that, well, their worldview is just a little different based on other factors that I can't control. But it doesn't mean we can't have a conversation around what is actually happening by and large in the country, right? They're not to quote Ben Shapiro, but sometimes facts do not care about your feelings. It doesn't matter how you feel about a particular thing. Sometimes the objective truth is that this isn't a systemic issue. This is an episodic issue, which is always going to be taking place. There's always going to be small little pockets of things. You're just not, like you said, like very leading into this. You're not going to get like 100% compliance from everything. You're not going to get 100% agreement on anything. There's always going to be something, some other thing at work pushing back. But that's also the barrier to success, right? Your dissenters, your people pushing back on you. And it's a thing I deal with all the time because I'm trying to find my voice, but also what medium do I want to work in? Like, do I want to write this stuff down? Do I want to YouTube it? Do I just want to live stream it? It's really difficult. Like all these things like factor into my personal journey and how I get it out there. My head hurts.
No, I loved that, Shag, and I share a lot of those same feelings and concerns. Rez and I have talked about it at length. That's why it says Prax. That's why it says Rez.
Yeah.
And like, I I think the way I try to deal with that is, still always be building, always be introduced. Like there's people out there who are doing it 10, 100x better than me. So at a minimum, if I can expose my audience, our audience, to those people, then in essence the the mind can still be awakened if it's not directly through me, right? And that's really what we're about is trying to help people experience freedom because it is liberating. Like once you've been liberated from like the paradigm of like team A, team B, red or blue, and you can approach life not as like what is my stance on this issue, but instead what are the principles that inform a stance on an issue. That's what real freedom looks like, and because then I don't have to get my talking points from anyone. Then I can navigate no matter what changes about the future. I still have the principles, the bedrock with which to engage that, and that's
Mm-hmm.
awesome. I mean, I am a better person because of that. Personally happier because of that. Able to feel like I can raise my children better because of that. And I think the more we can just expose people to how that is such a big gap, maybe in their lives personally and in our culture at large. Like I think about every time some corporation gets involved with like letting someone go, firing someone, canceling them because they did something outside the allowable opinion. What do they always appeal to? They always make some press release or some statement on Twitter that says that so and so is not in line with our values. And I really think they're trying to cheat. They're cheat their way to saying like we're informed by principles and that's what we call our values, but they're not. They blow with the wind just like everybody
Mm-hmm.
else does, and they're
Yeah.
gonna do whatever it takes to whatever they need to do to contain a bad PR moment, right? So they our businesses are not driven by values. Our money is not driven on principles. Our economics are not driven on principles. We are at the we are starving as a society. We are starving for principles that undergird our decisions to make long-term choices that create long-term value, and we're starving for that. So if we can be a voice that directs people to the help people graft themselves onto the vine of liberty so that the sap can begin to course through their veins, and it's a process, man. Like I'm still young in this thing. I'm like a decade in now, but it's a process, man. When I look back how far I've come and how much happier I am, even though I stand to maybe lose more, I think back to there's this great like video out there called non-compliance. If you Google it, it's pretty good. It talks about how it makes the case for decentralization. It makes the case for more of what ought our response be in the pandemic, and what's the legal framework for that, and
Mhm.
deconstructs a bunch of the living document nonsense and makes the case that states are sovereign nations that are coming together in a union and all this stuff. But one of the things that the author talks about in that is like when in human history has liberty been the norm? And then it says when liberty has prevailed, when has it ever been cheap? When has it ever been easy? When has there never been sacrifice required? And so that was a real challenge to me, and she makes the case very well, I think, for we consider it a given, and it's just not. And we consider it easy to obtain, and it's not. And we think that we're going to get it without cost, and we're not. So I'm trying to balance though that message and that need with, like, as you are too, as a husband and father, a provider. Where how do you balance that? And so I think it's trying to create multiple streams of income, to be recession proof, to be uncancelable, and it's not easy, right? But we try to take small steps to do that, and I have a lot of respect for Rez for what he's done individually as a person to try to do that more in his life as well.
And we're trying to take on the culture, which I think is what you're trying to do too. For a long time, you're just starting to get into libertarianism, but I've been a libertarian basically for more than a decade, or about a decade at this point, maybe a little bit more. And we realized, or what the larger movement has started to realize over time is we always had that facts don't care about your feelings approach to things, but we've learned that there's a lot of people whose feelings don't care about your facts.
Right.
It's great.
And
Yeah.
and so uh reaching out, trying to affect the culture and just basically be cool, fun people who are also libertarians, who love liberty and peace and things like that, is is the better way forward. Libertarians have tried for so long now to just be like, we're above politics, we're above
Hmm.
all those things because we're right. And maybe you are right, but as Jeff Dice said, like, you may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. So
Right.
you can't try and just be outside of it, because that's how most of the world's in it, and they feel that way, and you're not going to be able to drag those people out. You've got to go and meet them there, and that's what we're all trying to do here, is just meet where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah. It essentially is kind of what the past couple of years has been like for me, is just trying to navigate all these different fields, because they're like, yeah, like especially with COVID, like I got laid off from my job in 2020, and because of it, I was living in Hawaii at the time, and I got laid off from my job, and tourism was shut down, and Hawaii's economy is 90% tourism. So, and then it took about 8 weeks for unemployment to kick in. I've been working since I was 18 years old. Like, I am owed a lot of money, but like I had to start thinking in the long term, like, okay, what does this look like for me and for my family? And with all that time on my hands, like, I just thought there's a lot of research to be done and multiple income streams. Like, what can I do to open up different avenues for me to provide for my family, to future proof our life a little bit and the life of my kids. Having kids is a daunting task on many levels,
Hmm.
and it's and you can't preach. But it's yeah, it I don't know. It's just it's all around. It's a daunting task, and I'm hoping I'm doing it right. And I know at some point I'll trip up, and but I think that's part of the journey. And no matter what you do, and kind of going back to what we said, like there's a high cost to freedom, and liberty, and it requires your work. And I remember listening to Tim Pool. He had someone from it was a woman from North Korea on her
Oh
on
man,
his podcast.
yeah.
I forget her name. But that one of the things she said is that one of the scariest parts of coming to America was like having to make all these decisions on my own. Like nothing's being made, no decisions or things are happening for me anymore. Like I actually have to go out and get this stuff. But people are, have yet to realize or have been conditioned to not realize the opportunity that exists out there, for them to think on their own, to do so much. Um, and the more I talk with people like yourselves and watch videos, and I think there really is hope, and I have to focus like internally. I have to focus here at home.
Mhm.
Again, the great Jordan Peterson, like clean your room,
Right.
because ultimately that's like if I can do that here, my kids will see that. Like my kids see my wife and I love each other. They will learn that that's how you love another. They will learn to pick up, and apologize and all this stuff. And it'll get better. It's not going to get better in the time frame people want.
Right.
And but
Well, as we're coming to the end here, I'm not going to get through everything I said because we've had a fantastic conversation. I loved it.
That's great.
The last thing I'm going to ask for everyone is you got to pick one line. What's your favorite? From B for Vendetta, by the way. We were talking about B for Vendetta. It's been a while.
I think the best one, and I'm sure you guys would probably agree, is people should not be afraid of their government.
Doggone
Government
it.
should be afraid of their people.
Yeah.
And even pre like when I heard that line in 2005, that line hit me, and I think it's just become truer and truer, and I think you're starting to see that shift. I think you are starting to see government officials really fear the people that they're supposed to be representing, because I think they realize that they're taking them for a ride, and we're all sort of being like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Even someone like my wife, who is not a political person, like I see that sort of thinking happening. So I think that is definitely one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful line in the movie.
Awesome. Definitely what I would say as well. I saw this on a sticker from the White Rose Society. I don't know if you guys have seen them, but they have a picture of the Guy Fawkes mask, and I didn't pick it out in the film, but is it said? I was listening for it, but maybe that was like had one too many old fashions. But like, did you hear them say it matters not what tyrants write on paper?
That's
Okay.
not in the movie.
Dang it. Okay.
No.
All right. So that was just from the sticker. Yeah. So then I'm gonna have to agree with Shagsworth for sure. People should be not be afraid of their government. Government should be afraid of their people, and that largely comes from just this idea that should be top of mind for everyone, but it isn't. Is that rights do not come from the government. The purpose of government is to secure our rights. If it has any
Right.
purpose at all, it's to secure our rights that we have before any government is formed. And if it fails to do those things, then it's failing at its primary purpose, and it should be revised or redone entirely, if that's the case. And it only comes from the consent of the governed. And you and I should be able to withdraw our consent at any time, individually. So, Rez, if you want to continue on with this government, have at it, right? But I can withdraw my consent
Like hell.
individually. What's that? Oh, like hell, yeah. So,
Wasn't that the purpose of the Constitution too?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's like the literal, like, well, not the literal words, but it gives power to the people, the not the government, or it's supposed to theoretically.
yeah.
But
And there's some libertarians who can you know get upset, and they can say like, oh, the Articles of Confederation were fine. Okay, sure, right. But like either one, the idea is what we have now is crazy compared to you know how it started, how it's going. That meme. I mean, we've seen the Center for Disease Control just edict private property rights. You know, we have for the first time. I never would imagine that like the alphabet agency OSHA is going to get in the way between employers and employees relationships. Even if they're doing like bang up work, performance reviews are off the charts. They're killing it. They're crushing it. They're delivering value to customers every day of the week. But if they don't consume this new to market pharmaceutical product and have it coursing through their veins, one that may have been developed using like aborted fetal tissue, that's going to be grounds for exiting the company. It's nuts. I mean, like we just we're getting to the point now where we're packaging these, a huge omnibus bill behind closed doors and then like just ramrodding it through, where we don't even have representative government and we're doing like one law a year now. It's bonkers, and I think that there's a certain level of hubris in a certain level. There's a massive amount of hubris in our leaders today because they just think they can continue to do this without repercussions. And this is not a call for taking up the sword or any kind of violence, but I mean,
Right.
you keep this stuff up, eventually, I mean, the guillotines are going to come back out. That's all I'm saying. Like it doesn't trend this way forever, and just things don't happen to those who are doing it. And all we can do is just pray for them to see some truth, because they're right now they're seem pretty blind and dead set on domination.
Yep.
So, for my line, first of all, y'all are rookies. Everyone picks John 3:16. You got to know something right. You got to know to pick something different.
I also have an honorable mention. I will say, I think you'll be impressed by my choice if it's not yours. So go ahead.
All right. My favorite line from the movie is, "Our integrity sells for so little, but it is all we really have. It is the very last inch of us. Within that inch, we are free."
Mm.
And that is for how
Integrity?
we proceed.
A movie
That is
talking
how-
about integrity? It's crazy.
That is how we three proceed as well. That is how we make our decisions moving forward, because it is only within that inch that we are free and that we can live with ourselves. So we run into that suffering, into the unknown. We risk our family's futures or a comfortable future for our integrity, and witness the tens of thousands of activists and journalists and Twitter people and politicians and pundits and news anchors and people who in 10 years will not matter. No one will know their names and no one will care, and they will have nothing because they sold themselves out to the masses to try and get it now. They gave up their integrity to get that, and they will be nothing. They will be dust in history.
Wow.
And we are not going to do that.
Yeah.
That's a good word. I found that encouraging. Thank you, Rez.
I
welcome.
have one more that I thought I wrote this
I'll
one
allow it.
down. Thank you. Thank you. May I submit? This was spoke by Dietrich, right, the comedian or the jester. He while he was explaining his time, basically in his late night show, he says, "You wear a mask for so long, you begin to forget who you are underneath it."
Wow.
It was sort of his like. He said it right before, like during the broadcast, like he was, or I think it was like his justification to Evie of why he did it. He's like, I've been doing what I've been told for so long that I forgot that like there is real comedy in the world. I can actually bring laughter to people. But I think we're all just seeing this too right now. Is I think, and I look at myself this way. Because when I was sort of like in this sort of progressive SJW state, I forgot who I was. I forgot like what I actually believed in because people were telling me I had to do it. I had to pull that mask down over my face, and it got to a point where I was so uncomfortable, and I just started like, I guess the very beginning of everything was slowly lifting the mask by playing devil's advocate with people, and I would piss people off, and I just thought I was being playful and fun. But the more I played devil's advocate, the more I realized like something ain't right, and I had to like, and in that lifting of the mask, like while I wasn't black bagged or anything, it felt like it from my family and friends who I'd spent, years with and developing relationships. that line, when he says it kind of like it's kind of fleeting, but it is a really good line. It was a really good line to catch because it just seemed so poignant. Like that whole movie is just for now is just amazing and relevant again. But
And I know we're running over time here. I got a little bit tangential thing to what you were just talking about that I was reminded. You know, you had said very early on, Prax, that like we don't live in this culture anymore. Now it's the left that's the oppressive culture. It's not the Christian conservative right that is oppressive anymore. But I was just reading in Russia, where they really want to protect the church there, where there was like a couple who did like they pretended a woman was pretending to blow her mate, like with the Russian church in the background, and they're getting 9 months in prison.
Ooh, boy.
And I'm an Orthodox Christian. Prax is ortho-curious, and I don't know where, and I don't know where you are, Shag, and that's cool wherever you are. But I don't want that either.
Right.
And the Russian Orthodox Church is like the official, basically, religion of Russia at this point. But it's like it's good to remember, like that's where we came from. It's not where we are in the West anymore. But the East is heading a little bit of that way too. And there's people I've seen comments like on the sections like, good for Russia, yeah. Like, no, because if you go back that way, you know where we end up? Where the West is right now.
Right.
As long as you're using the power of the state to get what you want, it's always going to swing back the other direction.
Right.
Yeah.
And probably further and be worse. So, anyways.
Shag, you want to plug whatever you got going on here? I would definitely want to come out and support you at that conversation you're talking about.
Oh yeah, there's not an official date of it yet, but I'll definitely let you guys know when that pops up. It's been kind of tough to pin this person down because they're all over the place.
They're schedule fluid.
Schedule fluid.
Very. But you know, I have my channel on Twitch, twitch.tv/the Shagsworth, the Shagsworth on YouTube as well. The content on YouTube is sort of scarce at the moment. I also have a Substack that I just started up today.
Cool.
I got one that came out this afternoon, and I have one poised to come out tomorrow. It's basically my own like sort of like water cooler talk. It's not really meant to be anything formal. It's just meant to sort of be like a brain dump for like what's going on. Again, it's more to sort of find my niche and find like where I like to do things. And YouTube is tough. I like as a dad of two and a partner, my partner is busy as well with school and work, and there's only so many hours in the day, as you guys know. So finding time to do like live streaming 4 days a week and any other content is really difficult. And I've seen some decent growth over the past 6 months of like since I've restarted doing everything, and like sort of kind of filtered into new crowds. So really my focus right now is my Substack for writing, sort of like think of it like a more refined live journal, if you remember those.
Oh yeah.
And then my Twitch stream. So I stream Friday through Monday from about 9 p.m. Mountain Standard Time till like 12 or 1, depending how awake I can keep myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, variety streaming is what I do. Mild bit of social commentary, and my Twitter account at the Shagsworth. You could find some silly things on there too. I'm a little bit more opinionated on there, but I follow a lot of
Twitter.
Really cool
no way.
Imagine, right? But yeah, it's a lot of good stuff happening. I feel like I'm sort of coming into my own and learning what I'm comfortable with and not. So feel free to follow me on any of those. More stuff to come for sure.
Nice.
Thank you for having me today, by the way. This was really, really awesome. I love talking movies. I love watching movies. So.
Yeah, this is great. I'll be happy to do it again. It's probably our best episode we've ever done, so you're definitely boosting our numbers. So,
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. And we already mentioned a few. Like, want to go over all of the Lord of the Rings and how that how the ring can represent government power. Basically, there's a ton of things, ton of movies to go over. So we'll definitely have you back.
Sweet, man.
As far as Gamertarians, we got our D&D stream on the 15th at 9 Eastern or 8 Eastern. I think
it's 9.
9 Eastern. Okay. 9 Eastern, and we're looking forward to continuing that campaign with Ryan from Rolling Bones. Having a great time with the brothers Page as well. It's going really well. I'm looking forward to continuing to play my half gnome, half orc, what an artificer, which is the new class available. So, first time playing that, and Ryan's a great DM. He
Nerd.
runs a tight game. I am a big nerd. I'm not gonna say like, oh, what are you talking about? Yeah, I am.
I mean, I'm playing with you, so.
I know, but almost against your will.
It was at first. Now I'm having fun. So
Okay,
I guess
good,
I'm nerd
good.
too now.
Nice. All right, cool. Well,
And we've also got
yeah.
us on YouTube. Check us out on YouTube. We got our
yeah,
pre-done games that we played, our pre-recorded content, and we stream on Twitch every 9 to 11 on Tuesdays, as long as everything works and there isn't tech problems, in which case we don't stream that night. But
we're figuring it out though. Like Shag's introducing us to cool tools that we're gonna help make our lives easier too. So
God, I hope so.
yeah, good. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We had a great conversation, and we'll catch you next week. Until then, remember to love the game.
Hate the state.
Peace out, everybody. I just used the wrong screen. There's so many in here, dude. I gotta clean it up. Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and raid somebody too. That's fun. Should I do limit maximum or Fabian? Oh, okay. Thanks again, Shag. That was awesome. What? Oh, no, I lost him too. Oh, right. Okay. I should have hosted him.